Good Monday morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this week's weather briefing. I'm excited to welcome Dan DePodwin, AccuWeather's Manager of Forecasting Operations, as this week's presenter. And without further ado, Dan, I will let you take it away.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Always good to be here for another Penn State map discussion. And the second virtual one, I guess. I'm not sure I did one in the spring of 2020, but I do like the virtual format, I think. So it's great to be able to still participate in these once a semester. I like to start usually with just an overview of something I found interesting in the last couple weeks or so, and then dive into the weather over the next week. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan DePodwin, Manager of Forecast Operations at AccuWeather, Penn State grad of class of 2011, and you can find me via email and on Twitter down there at the bottom. So I wanted to start with what was a very anomalous event on Friday, which was the Middlebury, Vermont tornado that ended up being an EF1 that occurred just after lunchtime, basically on Friday. And it was after the survey by the NWS of Burlington, it was rated an EF1, and it unfortunately injured two people. It was a path of 1 mile long with 75 yards wide at its maximum width. And it's only the second tornado in March in Vermont on record, the other being March 22nd, 1955 in Shaftesbury, which was an F2. So really anomalous. It flipped a car, removed an attached garage from a house, and uprooted numerous trees. And here's a picture of it over the historic Marble Works district in Middlebury. So also where my dad went to school. But a very interesting event, and I wanted to just take a look at this because I think it shows you that this type of event, while anomalous, can also be predicted if you look at the right tools beforehand. Feel free to put any questions too in the chat along the way, and I can do my best to answer. So here's my really crude surface analysis from Friday morning, which I had, basically a front near Burlington, just in the warm sector probably, but a pretty anomalously moist air mass. Tough to see here, but dew points in the mid 50s or so to start the morning. Here's your 50-degree, the green line here is your 50-degree isodrosotherm. And you have a low that's deepening, or it may have fully deepened at this point, but in any event, a pretty substantial low over southern Ontario, and that caused obviously our really gusty winds on Friday. So you are solidly into the warm sector, obviously a prerequisite for almost all tornadic events. So that is the 12Z surface analysis from Friday morning. I want to show that first, or yeah, let me go back to this was, so I was taking a look at this on Thursday afternoon as the storms were ongoing in the south, but also noting that we should not sleep on the threat for severe weather in the Northeast on Friday. And I was taking a look at some of the different model guidance, and I found this, and this wasn't just one sounding from the NAM. There was some support from other models, but I use this as an example here. This was the forecast sounding from 18Z on March 25th for 18Z on March 26th. And I think, yeah, and this is the Burlington, Vermont forecast sounding, and it outlines the possible hazard type of tornado, but you can see you have really good speed and directional shear. You have enough low level moisture. Photograph is fairly favorable. You have plenty of storm relative felicity predicted, and you have plenty of CAPE. You don't need a ton of CAPE to get a tornado, obviously. With surface-based CAPE of 824, forecast CAPE of 1509. So certainly a supportive sounding, but I saw this on Thursday, and I was talking with some of the different meteorologists at AccuWeather, noting that we should make sure we're keeping an eye on this for Friday because it looked pretty impressive, especially for this time of year. So always important to back up the forecast sounding with an observed sounding. So here's the observed sounding from Albany on Friday morning. And that's a pretty impressive Albany, New York sounding in March. You've got a cap, pretty substantial cap. You've got a decent mid-level lapse rate. Really, I mean, talk about directional shear. It's not even just a south or a south-southeast flow. It's a southeast flow at the surface, and a southwest flow aloft. Good speed shear as well. Again, a pretty favorable photograph. All your composite indices, all the fancy ones that help calculate, your supercell composite and everything are zero. probably because of the cap, I would think. But you can see the potential from this sounding here, right? If you're able to realize some of this cape and shear and break the cap, you could be in a situation where you are favorable for severe weather. So this was a setup on Friday morning in Albany. Obviously, you're expecting some of that air mass northward. And this was the surface analysis from the SPC meso analysis here at 17Z. The tornado occurred about 1745, 1750Z. So about 45 minutes or so before the tornado. You've got temperatures, hard to see. These maps are always so cluttered, but temps in the low 60s up here near Middlebury, dew point near 60, surface lows tracking north and west. So you're in the warm sector, and you've got a south to south-southwest surface flow. And then obviously your upper level flow is somewhere out of the southwest or west. So certainly still enough shear. Surface base cape just enough nudging into central Vermont. You don't need a ton, just enough though, between 250 and 500 joules per kilogram of cape, and that's nosing northward in the warm sector. And storm relative felicity here, again, the values that are supportive for tornadoes. And then the supercell composite, which I always like to look at last. Always good to look at your other parameters, instability, moisture, shear, and then sort of confirm it. At least I like to do that with your composite parameters. So certainly a conducive environment. I mean, all the ingredients were there, and that's what happened. The first or the second tornado ever in Vermont in March. Pretty impressive damage. Car flipped. This garage was removed from the house and totally damaged, obviously. This tree was uprooted along with other trees. It was on the ground for a mile. So a really impressive event for really any time of year in Vermont, but especially March. So I thought it was really interesting. All the South got and rightfully so, had the attention over the last several days, but shows that if you're paying close attention, you can sort of find these things before they happen. Wouldn't have been a surprise if for anyone that had looked at guidance on Thursday. There certainly were signals that severe weather could occur on Friday in upstate New York and Vermont, which absolutely happened. There were a lot more damaging wind reports too. I don't have a screenshot of that, but there definitely were damaging wind reports in that region, in addition to this tornado on Friday afternoon. Any questions on that part before I move on to the weather today and for the upcoming week? I'm going to stop my share briefly. Feel free to put any questions in the chat if you want. Switch over different screen here.
While you're working on that, Dan, just want to go on and reiterate for folks, if you do have any questions, they can go in the chat or the Q&A. If you do put them in the chat, please make sure to direct them to all panelists and attendees. There's a little menu there at the bottom so that everybody can see your messages.
All right, so we'll move along to what's happening now and over the next week or so. I'll actually start with a satellite here this morning. Hopefully it's looping well on your end. It's not too laggy with the screen share, but I'll loop it a few times and then stop it. But we are in the wake of our low from yesterday and a good solid northwest flow with our standard March stratocumulus here across State College, as is fairly standard this time of year. Front, as we can see, draped back across Florida and through the Gulf. Very quiet over most of the nation this morning. Looks like some low clouds, maybe some precipitation associated with it here and across the central Great Lakes. And a pretty impressive storm system moved into the West Coast overnight. I haven't taken a look at what was observed wind-wise and such, but I know that we were predicting that would be some pretty strong winds with that system, so we can take a look at that here in a minute. But pretty quiet overall here to start the last half week of March here. We are backed up by our surface analysis with, obviously, if it's quiet, we expect high pressure, which we see stretch all the way from Texas into the Northeast. Pretty impressive surface low. Looks like somewhere in the 980, mid 980 millibar range here. That's moving to the Northeast across Atlantic Canada. Fronts almost through Florida. And then we can see some warm advection occurring over the Great Lakes, probably associated with those clouds that we saw on the satellite. And a series of fronts here analyzed across the Northwest and Northern Rockies. And some, maybe hard to see, but some gustier winds behind these fronts. And if we look at the radar, we would expect again to see fairly quiet weather in most places. Some lingering showers here with the front across central Florida, but nothing really impactful at this time. Some showers lingering again along with the front in southern Texas, and some lingering flurries across New York and parts of the Northeast in the wake of our storm. And again, we expect some precipitation across the Northwest. And with that, it looks like some warm advection, light snow in Wisconsin and Michigan. So winter not over yet, although it seems like it's been over in a lot of places for the last couple of weeks. The upper Midwest has had very little winter this year. They had a cold stretch there with the Arctic blasts in February, but aside from that, they're well below normal on snow. And temperature-wise, I think they're pretty far above normal. So it's been a pretty uneventful winter in places that typically have pretty challenging stretches this time of year. I will switch then to sort of what we're looking at over the next couple of days. I guess actually, I wonder if we should take a look at the Northwest first. Pretty impressive wind event though, out in the Pacific Northwest. We'll start there, I guess, because that's sort of the more impactful weather that's happening here this morning. Pretty deep and deepening surface low here that moves to the east across southern Canada here. This morning progged at 986 down to 977 by this evening on the GFS. Lots of wind and snow on the backside of it, but also ushering in a lot of wind in the northern Rockies. I'll pull up some of the METARs that are current here to see what type of wind we're experiencing out here. But I know we were thinking 60 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts in a lot of places, which is pretty, it's sort of standard in a lot of these spots, but still a very windy day. Here, Sheridan, Wyoming, gusting to 48. So certainly a blustery, wintry day across the Northwest. Pretty chilly morning in Seattle, 35. By this time of year, we start to warm up a bit, and definitely a chilly start of the week out there. So this low deepens and moves across Canada. I'll switch to the 500 millibar panels here and just use the GFS to sort of talk generally about the week, and then we can go into some details. But you've got this pretty impressive shortwave that's cut off at 500, moving east and northeast, and then lifting by tomorrow morning. You've got a fairly significant ridge over the east and a long wave trough digging into the Great Basin and Four Corners region. By tomorrow evening, the shortwave that's created this storm out west has lifted all the way to James Bay, and now you've got a sort of strung out much larger trough across the plains that's moving eastward. Take it forward to Wednesday morning, and we continue to advance that trough to the east. And then by Wednesday evening, it looks like we dig some more energy into the trough, and it definitely starts to dig. And then that becomes the focal point for the end of the week, or the middle to end of the week fun potential in the east with a late season winter weather event, it looks like. I'll just compare the GFS here on Wednesday evening with the Euro and toggle back and forth a couple times. Fairly similar solution. This is the 6E GFS and the 0Z Euro, and the Euro is a little more amplified, more sharp with the shortwave here. And by Thursday morning, we get, it's trying to cut itself off at 500. Got a lot of positive vorticity advection occurring across the Northeast. And we would expect to see a surface response to that, which we do, with a 999 millibar low over Long Island on the Euro, and 1,001 millibar low over just east of Boston on the GFS. So that's I would say, I guess the fun in the forecast is Wednesday evening into Thursday morning, just before opening day for baseball fans out there. So we can dive into that a little bit more. Before we get to that, though, I think just talk briefly about today here locally. We'll focus on locally here for the next remaining part of this discussion. But it looks like we're cloudy this morning. I'm seeing a few more breaks of blue sky though out my window here, and with the trough axis now well to our east, we're starting to get into some upper level ridging, and by 2 p.m. expected to be sort of into that ridge, and same by 8 p.m. So probably expect the clouds to start to dissipate as we head through the day. We're really dry in the mid levels, as you can see here at the 700 millibar relative humidity. So don't have to worry about mid-level moisture. I'll pull up the forecast sounding too. Let's go to today's sounding, forecast sounding for this afternoon. Yeah, so here's the 21Z sounding on the GFS, and we've significantly dried out in the mid-levels compared to, or in the low levels, I should say, probably in 850 millibars. If I go to sort of current time, see how much more moist it is. Yep, certainly a little more moist, but you can see we're really dry above. So would think it would turn into a pretty sunny rest of the day after lunchtime. Probably still have a few clouds around here, given how cold it is aloft and such, but pretty standard March day. I think our normal right now is right around 50. So that's where we should be later on this afternoon. Given the stretch of milder weather of late, it feels chilly, but overall, this is where we generally expect to be in late March. Moving ahead toward to tomorrow, tomorrow should be a really nice day in between storm systems. We've got upper level ridging. We can look at our 850 millibar temps today. They're hovering right around 0 Celsius by this evening, and they warm up rapidly. By tomorrow, we're somewhere between 5, 6 C. In terms of clouds tomorrow, we're dry in the mid levels, plenty of dry air at 700. And I'll pull up some forecast soundings. Tomorrow seems like one of those sneaky warm days. I mean, it's going to be warm, but it's always this time of year you get the right conditions. You can pretty easily go above guidance, which is in the mid 60s. It looks like from what I glanced at this morning. Pull up let's see here. This is tomorrow at 15Z. So let's go to 21Z tomorrow. Well mixed all the way up to 850. And again, fairly dry throughout the column. A bit breezy, a bit of a southerly to southeasterly surface flow. Maybe that's the one limiting factor tomorrow to be a really warm day. You typically here like to see more of a southwest to southwest flow at the surface, but we had a lot of southeast flows last week, or a week and a half ago, and we got pretty mild as well. So I wouldn't think that'll cause us any issues. Tomorrow looks like a pretty nice day, all things considered. These days, you typically can go above guidance, especially because we don't have vegetation yet on the trees. That helps you boost a little bit more as well. Always good to see what you mix down from 850 to get a number on days like this that are well mixed. So tomorrow ends up being nice. Probably stay mainly cloud free, except for probably high clouds, one would assume. I haven't looked at sounding for tomorrow night into Wednesday, but probably start to bring in some higher clouds by Wednesday morning. And we see a lot of precipitation over the Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley by Wednesday morning, and that's going to move our way by Wednesday later in the day, with this trough really starting to move east. Wednesday probably ends up being, it doesn't to me look like a soaker, it just looks like a cloudier day with on and off rain. I doubt it rains all day, but it certainly feels damp all day. Let's look at a couple soundings here to see what it looks like on Wednesday afternoon. Then we can talk about the potential for snow here on Wednesday night and whether much exists for one. Wednesday morning, nice cool start of the day Wednesday with a southeast surface flow. Go to Wednesday afternoon here. This is all the GFS, so we're not comparing models, but at least one idea of what could happen. Again, we're still your typical sounding for it to be cloudy with on and off rain in State College. So seems like a on and off rain type of day for the middle of our week. And then the challenge for Wednesday night. To me, it doesn't look overall like a great setup for much snow here. That's not the case well north and west of here across northwestern Pennsylvania, parts of northeastern Ohio, and western New York. You've got a low that's developing to our east, but it really develops too late. We've got to watch that though. If it develops a little earlier, you can bring in some of that colder air more quickly. You don't have a good cold high pressure out ahead of the system. The high here is obviously behind it across Quebec and the Great Lakes. We're going to be in the mid 60s tomorrow. So that's another potential limiting factor, especially to accumulation of any snow that falls. the thing to watch out for to me on Thursday night is, how quickly this low can deepen. How quickly does this upper level low cut off, if it cuts off at all. If it cuts off a little quicker, a little further west, have a better chance of getting some colder air and some snow locally. Watch the 850 millibar low track. Here's the Prague of the Euro on Wednesday overnight, and you've got 850 millibar low going, basically across us and then northeast of us into the Poconos. Could you get some snow on the backside of that to change at the last minute? Yeah, but it probably doesn't amount to much. You want to see that low tracking from southeast of us to northeast of us, and here you don't really see that. Certainly it cools down quickly in mid-levels. So any lingering moisture can turn to snow. The challenge in all these situations is how much precipitation actually lingers. But as you can see, at least the Prague's here with a strengthening low, you'd expect a pretty good shield of precipitation on the backside by Thursday during the day. And it probably turns into a pretty significant late winter event for parts of New York and New England, with, I would imagine, 3 to 6, if not more than 6 inches of snow in some of the higher terrain. This time of year, you get into pretty significant elevation differences with snow, and a fun April Fool's not joke for a lot of people. A start of April snow event, it looks like. Probably not here, but definitely north of here for the first day of April. I'll just look a little bit out into the longer range here. By Friday, that system departs. We're probably on the cooler side, though, to end the week. We get into that sort of residual trough there and chilly northwesterly flow. But we warm up quickly, it looks like. I would watch for Saturday to be one of these sneaky warm days again. It looks you go from a pretty deep trough. This is the trend that we've been in the last couple of weeks, where we have pretty quick hitting shots of chillier air, but then the day later we warm up again to a ridge, and you can look at the 850 millibar temps and see that we go from 10 below Celsius to 2 to 3, 4, 5 above by Saturday afternoon with a westerly flow. That's a pretty good signal for a day that may overperform guidance again. So could be a good start of the weekend here, and maybe a really good end of the weekend too on Sunday. Got to watch this time of year. Looks like the Euro is trying to show some type of front here. You can see the kinks in the isobars on Sunday. Always got to watch the backdoor fronts in April, especially where it can look like it's going to be 70 and then it ends up being 50 or 45. So keep an eye on that for Sunday. But at this point, Saturday looks pretty nice. And then the weather pattern overall looks pretty quiet. I was taking a look at some of the data for the first week or two of April, and it looks like it sort of just quiets down overall. It's not as active as it's been in terms of severe weather either, which is good. We could use a break, especially in the South, from the relentless severe weather potential over the last couple of weeks. The last thing I wanted to show was, I'll have to load these loops again. Unfortunately, looks like they didn't stay on me here, but I wanted to show the, just take a look at the European Ensemble to show what it is suggesting when it comes to snowfall for the end of the week, or in the middle of the week, I should say. Here's the European Ensemble mean snow accumulation. Again, as we talked about, it's a New York, New England event, but pretty impressive totals predicting. This is a 10-to-1 ratio, so could be less than that depending on how it all sets up. But it's trying to show an inch here. These situations always seem to be really challenging locally to get much in the way of accumulation. Again, watch for a negative tilt more earlier. Watch for the 500 millibar load to be cut off quicker. And if that can happen, there's a better potential for appreciable accumulation locally. Not much of a chance of over 2 inches of snow locally, but again, you go north of here, it picks up pretty quickly. And I guess I will just share at the end, I will always remember this event. It's a situation where you can be surprised with spring snow events in State College. This was my senior year, March 6th, 7th of 2011. Bit of a different setup. You've got a negatively tilted trough and a surface low that's already going across Virginia, and then that deepens as it moves across New Jersey. So a different type of setup. Instead of this trough moving sort of in from the west and departing off to the northeast, this sort of came in from the southwest up to northeast. So it's different setup, but we got 10 inches of snow out of this, and it was a surprise, let me tell you. Probably one of the biggest forecast busts that I've had, and the PA the PennDOT forecast group had that year. Was not one of our better moments, but a pretty unusual situation there. But that can happen if you get the right setup. But at this point, to me, that doesn't look likely. So I will end there and be happy to answer any questions or discuss any comments. So.
All right, thank you very much, Dan. Again, the chat and the Q&A are both available to any who would like to offer a comment or have a question. I remember a couple of years ago, April 1st, I want to say 2019. Yeah, that might be right. My house got about a half inch of snow in North Carolina. I remember my parents sending me a video of it, and I was like, wait a second, it's April. They're south of me. What?
Yeah. We had a really wet snow event when I was growing up in New Jersey on April 1st, 96, I think it was. It was a pretty impressive event from my memory.
Well, you certainly won't find me complaining if we get more snow. I realize I'm in the minority here.
This time of year, at least it goes away quickly. It goes away quickly.
Yes. Yeah, we were talking about that in Weather Challenge the other day. We were just shooting the breeze after putting our forecast in, and there were I think it was a couple of rogue GFS Ensemble members that were trying to put down 1.5 feet in New York. Obviously an outlandish solution, but we were all like, well, even if that does verify, it's going to be gone.
The Bill said he wasn't aware of that tornado. Yeah, that was quite an impressive event Friday, and go Yankees, Marissa. I actually did want to show. Thanks for reminding me. I was going to show the New York City sounding for opening day, which is really not a day. It's not going to be one you want to be sitting in the stands for, I don't think. Really not the nicest opening day. They should clear out in terms of precipitation, but that's not great. Here's the GFS for Thursday around the time of opening pitch for the Yankees game, with a 15-mile-an-hour northwesterly wind, 48 degrees, and probably pretty cloudy. So, hey, April 1st is not the, you can get all sorts of weather. Last year, everyone knew that was going to be nice or a thunderstorm, right? But in April, we get all sorts of stuff. I didn't have a chance to look at the severe weather from yesterday, but there's some impressive reports in Southeast Pennsylvania yesterday too, with that line that went through yesterday evening. The storm reports from Friday too, one tornado and a few other damaging winds. With that, basically, it was one little convective system that went across that started just east of Lake Ontario and east.
110 miles an hour, I think, is the top of the EF1 wind range. I think.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My chat froze. My chat box froze. Yeah. I was a little surprised they didn't make it an EF2, but I'm not a damage expert. But a car flipped and a garage removed from a house seemed to be pretty impressive to me. I'm not sure where that, it's probably borderline.
Oh, I'm just now seeing that your video froze.
I had that on and off today. I'm not sure why. So.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions and comments, we can wrap things up here. Dan, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This weather briefing and all other weather briefings will be archived on the Campus Weather Service YouTube page at youtube.com/campusweatherservice. And I look forward to having all of you join us next week when Dr. Kevin Boley from the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science will give next week's weather briefing. That'll be at the same time, same place, 10:15 Eastern. We will see you all next week. Have a great week, everybody.